Put the pup down, human, before the sanctuary decides your punishment for you. Emily Carter stood frozen beneath the silver arches of the forbidden sanctuary, both arms wrapped around a trembling wolf pup no larger than a house cat, its moonlit fur pressed against the front of her torn white dress. 12 Lycan guards surrounded her in a half-circle, their polished silver spears angled toward the stone floor at her feet, close enough to warn, not close enough to touch. The air smelled of rain, pine, and ancient magic, the kind of magic every child in Blackwood County had been taught never to name aloud. Humans did not enter this place. Humans did not cross the Blackroot boundary. Humans certainly did not stand beside the sacred pool with the kingdom's most protected creature shaking against their chest. Emily knew all of that. She had known it since she was 6 years old, and her mother had pulled her away from the forest edge, whispering that the Lycans kept their holy ground beyond the fog, and that curious human girls who wandered too far were never welcomed back the same. Yet here she was at 22, barefoot on freezing marble, her fair hands streaked with silver water and dark soil, holding the one creature every Lycan in the north would bow to before they bowed to any crown. The pup whimpered, a small broken sound that made Emily tighten her arms despite the warning growls around her. "I said put it down," the lead guard snapped. His name was Marcus Hale. She recognized him from the border clinic, where he had once refused to let her treat a sick Lycan boy until no one else could calm the child's fever. He had looked at her then the same way he looked at her now, as if kindness from a human was an insult nature had not corrected yet. Emily swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry, but her voice came out clearer than she expected. "She's hurt." A few of the guards exchanged looks. Not concern. Suspicion. In their eyes, Emily could see the whole story they had already written: a human thief, a sacred pup, a forbidden shrine, a crime too obvious to question. None of them looked at the black vine fibers still tangled around the pup's back leg. None of them noticed the faint tremor running through its tiny body, or the way it pressed its nose into Emily's sleeve as if her heartbeat was the only safe sound left in the world. Outside the sanctuary, the forest had gone unnaturally quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Above them, moonlight poured through the open roof in a pale circle, turning the sacred pool into liquid glass. Emily had never seen anything so beautiful or so lonely. Then the pup lifted its head and released a thin, shimmering cry. The sound traveled through the stone pillars, through the silver leaves, through the bones of the mountain itself. Every guard went still. Far beyond the sanctuary walls, something answered. Not a howl. Not a roar. A low, commanding sound that rolled through the forest like thunder learning her name. Marcus turned pale. Emily felt the pup's tiny body relax for the first time. And from the darkness beyond the archway, a voice colder than moonlit steel said, "Who brought a human girl into my sanctuary?" The voice did not need to be loud to silence them. It moved through the sanctuary like winter air under a closed door, soft at first, then everywhere. Marcus Hale lowered his spear by an inch, and the other guards followed because no Lycan in Blackwood Kingdom ignored that voice and remained standing with pride. Emily did not turn right away. She could not. Her whole body had become a careful promise around the pup, a silent vow that if the world reached for this small shivering creature, it would have to move through her fear first. The sacred pool glowed behind her, pale and still, reflecting the broken moon above the open roof. Around the water, silver-barked trees curved inward like worshippers. Their leaves did not rustle. Their roots wrapped through the marble floor in ancient veins, each one marked with old Lycan symbols Emily had only seen from a distance on warning stones. No human beyond this point. No human hand upon sacred blood. No human voice within the moon chamber. Those were not suggestions in Blackwood. They were laws older than the county roads, older than the iron bridge that separated the human settlement from the Lycan preserve, older even then. The uneasy peace that kept both sides from crossing into each other's lives except for medicine, trade, and orders delivered by men who never said please. Emily had grown up beneath those laws. In school, human children were taught to stay on their side of the river after sunset. In church basements and grocery store aisles, adults lowered their voices when the black trucks of the Royal Guard rolled through town. Everyone knew the Lycans owned the northern woods. Everyone knew their king could scent a lie from across a room. Everyone knew the forbidden sanctuary was not a place. It was a boundary between the ordinary world and the one that still belonged to moonlight, instinct, and bloodline memory. And now Emily Carter, who owned 2 work dresses, 1 cracked pair of boots, and a rented room above the apothecary, was standing in the heart of it with the kingdom's most sacred living symbol tucked against her chest. She finally looked up. A tall figure stood beneath the far arch, half covered by shadow, his black coat moving slightly in the night breeze. He did not rush toward her. He did not need to. Power came ahead of him, pressing into the space until even the flames in the wall lanterns leaned away. His hair was dark, his face calm, and his eyes were a clear silver that caught the moon and held it. Emily knew him from coins, decrees, and whispered warnings. Alexander Blackwood, Lycan King of the Northern Territories. Marcus bowed his head. Your Majesty, we found her inside the sanctuary with the pup. Alexander's gaze did not leave Emily. I can see what she is holding. His eyes dropped to her hands, to the torn sleeve wrapped carefully around the pup's leg, to the silver water dripping from her fingers. Then his expression changed, not enough for the guards to notice, but enough for Emily to feel it like a shift in weather. He had smelled something they had not. He had found the fear, the rain, the crushed moon root in her pocket, the clean sting of panic on her skin. And beneath all of it, something impossible. Something the sanctuary itself seemed to recognize. Emily had spent most of her life being overlooked, but never by eyes like his. Alexander. Blackwood looked at her as if the whole sanctuary had fallen silent just to help him listen. She felt the weight of that attention settle over her shoulders, not cruel exactly, but absolute, the way a mountain might notice a sparrow trembling on its ledge. The pup gave another weak sound and tucked its nose beneath Emily's chin. That small movement broke something open inside her. Fear was still there, sharp and cold, but beneath it rose the stubbornness that had carried her through every door where she had not been wanted. I did not steal her, Emily said. Her voice shook on the first word and steadied by the last. Marcus gave a humorless laugh. Humans always have explanations after they are caught. Emily turned just enough to face him, careful not to jostle the pup. And Lycans always decide what they want to hear before anyone speaks. A faint stir moved through the guards. No one talked to Marcus Hale that way, especially not a human girl in a torn dress with mud on her feet. For a second, Emily almost regretted it. Then she remembered the pup under the black roots, remembered the way its tiny body had trembled when the vine tightened around its leg, remembered her own hands moving before her mind could measure the danger. Some things did not wait for permission. Earlier that night, she had been 3 miles south of the sanctuary, gathering moonroot in the wet brush behind the old ranger station. A Lycan child from the border clinic had been burning with fever, and none of the royal healers had come because the road was washed out from the storm. Emily had gone herself with a lantern, a canvas bag, and the kind of courage people only noticed when it belonged to someone important. The forest had been slick with rain. Her boots had filled with cold water. Twice, she had nearly turned back. Then she heard the cry. It was soft, almost swallowed by thunder, but it pulled at her heart with a force she could not explain. She followed it past the warning stones, past the silver wire fence, past the place where every sensible human would have stopped. Under a fallen cedar, the pup had been curled in a nest of black vine, its silver fur dimmed, its eyes barely open. Emily had whispered nonsense to it the way she whispered to frightened animals at the clinic. Easy now. I am here. You are not alone. The pup had looked at her as if it understood every word. Back in the sanctuary, Emily lifted her chin. There were black vines around her leg. I cut them loose. The poison was spreading. I brought her to the water because I did not know what else to do. Marcus stepped forward. Convenient story. The pup suddenly raised its head and let out a trembling growl, small but unmistakable. Marcus stopped. Alexander's gaze sharpened. For the first time, he spoke directly to Emily, not as a king to an intruder, but as a man trying to understand a miracle. "Show me her leg." Emily hesitated. Every instinct told her not to hand the pup over. Alexander seemed to sense it, because he lowered one hand, palm open, and did not move closer. "I am not asking you to let her go," he said quietly. "I am asking you to help me see the truth." Something in his voice made the sanctuary feel less like a courtroom and more like a held breath. Emily carefully shifted the pup just enough for the torn sleeve to fall away. Beneath the cloth, a faint dark stain still marked the silver fur, and tangled around one tiny paw was a single black thorn she had missed. The guards went silent. Marcus's face changed. Alexander stepped closer, his silver eyes fixed on the thorn. "That plant does not grow in this sanctuary," he said. Emily felt the pup shiver against her heart. The king looked from the thorn to Marcus, and the moonlight seemed to harden around him. "So the human girl did not bring corruption into my holy ground," he said. "She followed it here." The black thorn lay in Alexander's open palm, no longer than a sewing needle, yet it changed the air around everyone. Marcus stared at it as if it had spoken his name. The other guards drew back from the sacred pool, their confidence thinning into unease. Emily did not understand Lycan politics, not the old laws, not the sacred bloodlines, not the quiet fear that passed between trained warriors when the king recognized something they had missed. But she understood injury. She understood the difference between a creature that had been taken and a creature that had been abandoned. The pup was not guilty of anything except being small enough for danger to reach. "What is it?" Emily asked. Alexander closed his fingers around the thorn, carefully, as if even touching it required control. "Nightbane." The word moved through the guards like a cold draft. "It is not a common poison," he continued. "It is used to hide scent, confuse memory, and weaken anything born under the silver line." Emily looked down at the pup. Then she was not lost. Alexander's expression did not soften, but something in his eyes became heavier. No. She was hidden. The pup whimpered again, and Emily felt a faint tremor run up her arms. The silver light in its fur flickered once, then dimmed. Whatever the sacred pool had done, it had not done enough. The tiny body against her chest was still too cold. Emily shifted toward the water, but Marcus stepped in front of her. "Your Majesty, she has already contaminated the pool. We cannot allow her to keep touching the pup." Emily's breath caught. She expected Alexander to agree. Every law in this place had been built against someone like her. Human hands were ordinary. Human skin was unwelcome. Human mercy did not outrank sacred tradition. But Alexander did not look at Marcus. He looked at the pup, then at Emily's fingers, still wet with silver water. "When you touched the pool," he said, "did it burn?" Emily blinked. "No," a murmur spread through the guards. Alexander took one measured step closer. "Did the water turn dark?" "No." "Did the sanctuary reject you?" Emily glanced at the silver trees, at the moonlit pool, at the open archways where the wind had stilled around her like a waiting animal. "I do not know what that means." "You would know," Alexander said quietly. For the first time, his voice held something other than command. It held wonder, restrained but unmistakable. Emily lowered her eyes to the pup. The small creature was watching her now, amber gaze half open, trusting in a way that made Emily's chest ache. "She needs more than water," Emily whispered. "The poison is still moving." Marcus frowned. "You are not a healer." "No." Emily said. "But I work in a clinic. I know when something is fading." The words landed with a terrible silence. Then the pup pushed its nose against Emily's palm. A thin line of silver light spread beneath her skin, gentle and warm, tracing the shape of her lifeline. Emily nearly dropped to her knees, not from pain, but from the sudden feeling of being recognized by something far older than fear. The pool answered. Its surface rippled without wind. One by one, the silver trees bowed their branches toward her. Alexander saw it. So did every guard. Marcus took a step back. Emily stared at the glowing mark in her hand, her voice barely more than a breath. What is happening to me? Alexander looked at the pup cradled safely against her heart, then at the sanctuary bending around a human girl it should have cast out. It is choosing, he said. Choosing. The word seemed too large for Emily Carter, too sacred, too impossible to fit inside the small life she had known. She had been chosen for extra shifts at the clinic because she never complained. Chosen to run errands in storms because the Lycan nurses said human feet made less noise. Chosen to stand aside, lower her eyes, and pretend not to hear when soldiers called her fragile, temporary, breakable. But she had never been chosen by moonlit water, by silver trees, by a sacred pup trembling against her heart as if every ancient law in Blackwood had been rewritten around one breath. The glow beneath her palm pulsed again. Emily gasped softly, and the pup answered by pressing its tiny paw over the light. Warmth moved through her, not burning, not painful, but bright enough to make the cold marble beneath her feet feel far away. The dark stain in the pup's fur began to loosen, thinning like ink dropped into clear water. Alexander watched in stillness, but his stillness was not doubt. It was restraint. It was the discipline of a king who had seen armies bow and storms break over mountains, yet had never seen his sanctuary lean toward a human girl with such tenderness. Let her continue, he said. Marcus stiffened. Your Majesty, with respect, the law is clear. Alexander's eyes moved to him. The law is clear because the sanctuary made it clear. Tonight, the sanctuary is speaking again. No one answered. Emily barely heard them. Her world had narrowed to the pup's uneven breathing, the silver light in her hand, and the strange sense that something inside the tiny creature was reaching for her, not with words, but with memory. She saw flashes she could not explain. A stone cradle lined with white moss. A corridor of black roots. The pup crying beneath a fallen cedar while someone walked away through the rain. Not a face. Not a name. Only the feeling of being left where no one gentle was supposed to find her. Emily's eyes stung. You were scared, she whispered. That is why you called. The pup blinked up at her, and the silver mark on Emily's palm spread to her wrist in a thin crescent shape. Several guards dropped to one knee at once. Marcus did not. His jaw tightened as if loyalty and fear were pulling him in opposite directions. This could be a trick, he said. Humans have wanted access to royal ground for generations. What if she was sent to gain the pup's trust? Emily looked at him then, really looked. Her fear did not vanish, but it straightened. I was sent to gather moonroot for a sick child, she said. A child your patrol passed by because the bridge was flooded and the road was inconvenient. Marcus's face went silent. Alexander turned slightly. Which child? Noah Bell, Emily said. 7 years old. High fever. Lives near the south fence with his grandmother. A faint recognition passed through one of the younger guards. He lowered his gaze. The Bell boy is real, Your Majesty. Emily hugged the pup closer, careful but firm. I did not come here for your secrets. I came because something small was suffering, and every person stronger than me had looked the other way. The words left her before she could soften them. They hung beneath the silver branches, simple and devastating. Alexander studied her for a long moment. Then he removed his black coat and stepped forward. The guards held their breath. Emily did too. He did not touch her. He only draped the coat gently around her shoulders, shielding her torn dress from the cold night air. Then tonight, he said, his voice low enough for her alone and strong enough for everyone to hear, Blackwood owes its future to the one person it taught itself to ignore. The coat was heavy on Emily's shoulders, warm from the king and carrying the clean scent of cedar smoke, winter rain, and something wild that made the sanctuary feel suddenly smaller. She should have been afraid of it, of him, of the way every guard stared as if a line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. Instead, for one quiet second, she felt covered. Not claimed. Not owned. Covered, the way someone shields a candle from wind because the flame still matters. The pup breathed against her chest, steadier now, its silver fur brightening with each pulse of light beneath Emily's wrist. Alexander stepped back, giving her space, and that simple courtesy unsettled her more than his power had. Most Lycans took space without asking. He gave it back. Marcus noticed too, and the look on his face sharpened into something colder than doubt. Your Majesty, he said, keeping his voice controlled for the witnesses around him, the sanctuary may be reacting, but we still do not know how the pup left the inner grove. We do not know who placed Nightbane near royal ground. Until we do, this human should be confined. Emily's fingers tightened around the pup. Confined. A clean word for a locked door. A safe word for making her disappear while important people decided what her courage was worth. Alexander looked toward the eastern archway, where the fog beyond the sanctuary had begun to move in thin silver ribbons. The pup did not leave by the main path, he said. Her scent trail is broken. Marcus lowered his eyes. The storm washed away much of it. No, Alexander said quietly. Someone cut it. The younger guards shifted. Even Emily understood the difference. A storm made a mess. A person made a pattern. Alexander turned to the sacred pool. Its surface still glowed, but now the light gathered toward one side, near a row of moonstones embedded in the marble. Emily followed his gaze. One of the stones was dim. Not broken, not missing, just dull, as if something had passed over it and left a shadow behind. The pup stirred in her arms and let out a soft sound. Emily moved before anyone told her not to, stepping carefully toward the dim stone. Marcus reached out, then stopped when Alexander's glance cut toward him. Emily knelt beside the moonstone. The marble was cold under her knees. She shifted the pup to one arm and placed her glowing hand above the stone, not touching it, only hovering close. The silver mark on her wrist warmed. The dull stone answered with a faint flicker, and the air filled with the smell of wet leaves and ironwood bark. Then a memory rose from the floor itself. Not a full vision, not a clear face, only fragments of sound and movement. Quiet footsteps. A cloak brushing marble. The pup struggling softly. A whisper that did not belong to the forest. Take it beyond the boundary before dawn. Emily drew in a shaky breath. Someone carried her out, she said. Marcus scoffed too quickly. She is guessing. Alexander did not look away from Emily. What else? The glow spread to her fingertips, and the sanctuary trembled with a low, bell-like hum. Emily closed her eyes. She saw the fallen cedar again. The black vine. A gloved hand setting the pup down as if leaving behind a secret meant to be found by the wrong person. Then one final detail came sharp and clear, a silver guard clasp shaped like a hawk. Emily opened her eyes and looked at Marcus Hale's shoulder, where that same hawk clasp held his cloak in place. The sanctuary went silent. Marcus followed her gaze and took one careful step back. Alexander's voice lowered, calm and terrible in its restraint. Captain Hale, he said, why does holy ground remember your mark? Marcus Hale did not answer at first, and that silence told the sanctuary more than words could have. The captain's face remained carefully arranged, his shoulders squared beneath the silver-trimmed cloak, but Emily saw the smallest crack in him, the brief flicker of his eyes toward the western gate, the way his hand hovered near the hawk clasp as if he could cover it from the moon. The other guards noticed too. Doubt moved through them like a low wind through dry grass. Alexander did not raise his voice. He did not need to. I asked you a question. Marcus bowed his head, but not fully. Your Majesty, every royal guard passes through these grounds. The sanctuary could have remembered my mark from any patrol. The inner grove has been sealed for 3 nights, Alexander said. Only 3 people had permission to enter. Marcus looked up. Then perhaps one of them should be questioned before a human girl is trusted over your own captain. Emily felt the word strike the space between them. Human girl. He said it as if it explained everything wrong with her, as if her birth alone made her mercy suspicious. The pup gave a soft growl, not frightened this time, but warning. Its silver fur brightened, and the crescent on Emily's wrist answered with a warm pulse. Alexander's gaze shifted to the mark. For a moment, something ancient passed across his face, something deeper than surprise. Recognition, maybe. Or fear of what recognition could mean. He stepped closer to Emily, close enough that she could feel the stillness around him, but he kept his hands at his sides. When I entered this sanctuary, he said, I followed 2 scents. One was the sacred pup. The other was yours. Emily's heart stumbled. Mine. Marcus seized on the word. Exactly. She left a trail through forbidden ground. Alexander turned his head slightly, and Marcus stopped. Her scent was not hidden. It was not masked. It was not protected by night bane. She came through the forest in rain, carrying moonroot, fear, and blood from a scraped palm. She did not move like a thief. She moved like someone running toward a cry. The word settled over Emily with an ache she had not expected. No one had ever described her fear as evidence of courage before. No one had ever looked at the messy, trembling truth of her and called it anything but weakness. Alexander looked back at Marcus. But beneath her scent, I found another trace. Cold ash. Ironwood oil. The same oil used to preserve royal guard leather. One of the younger guards slowly looked down at Marcus's gloves. Marcus smiled, but the smile had no warmth. Many guards use that oil. Not with night bane, Alexander said. The sacred pool rippled. Emily looked at the pup and understood. Before anyone explained it. The sanctuary was not only reacting to her. It was answering the king. It was showing him where to look. The dull moonstone flickered again, and a thin line of silver light traveled across the marble floor to Marcus's boots, stopping there like an accusation too quiet to argue with. Marcus took 1 step back. The guards nearest him lowered their spears, not toward Emily now, but toward the floor between him and the exit, a silent barrier. Alexander's expression remained calm, but Emily could feel the force behind that calm, the terrible discipline of a king choosing law over anger. Captain Hale, you will be confined in the East Tower until the sanctuary's memory can be read in full. Marcus's eyes flashed. You would take the word of a human over mine. Alexander looked at Emily, at the pup resting against her heart, at the crescent mark glowing softly on her wrist. No, he said. I take the word of holy ground. And tonight, holy ground chose her voice. The guards moved around Marcus without rushing, and perhaps that was what made the moment feel heavier. No clash, no shouting, no spectacle. Just the quiet rearranging of trust beneath the moon. Marcus looked once toward the western gate, then toward the younger soldiers who had once followed his commands without question. None of them stepped aside. His pride did not break in a loud way. It folded inward, sharp and silent, as he surrendered his cloak clasp and allowed himself to be led from the sanctuary beneath the watching silver trees. Emily did not feel triumph. She felt the pup's tiny heartbeat against her chest and the strange ache of being believed only after holy ground had spoken louder than she could. Alexander remained still until Marcus disappeared beyond the archway. Then his attention returned to the moonstone at Emily's knees. The dimness within it faded, replaced by a gentle silver glow that spread through the marble veins beneath the pool. One by one, the other moonstones answered, lighting the sanctuary in a circle that looked almost like dawn trapped inside the floor. The pup lifted its head. Its amber eyes were clear now, no longer clouded by poison or fear. Emily let out a shaky breath she had not realized she was holding. "She is better," she whispered. The pup blinked once, then carefully stretched a paw toward Emily's glowing wrist. The crescent mark brightened. A thin silver thread rose from it, not like smoke, not like fire, but like moonlight made soft enough to touch. It curved around the pup's paw, then sank gently into its fur. Every Lycan in the sanctuary dropped to one knee. Emily froze. "What are they doing?" she asked. Alexander's voice was low. "They are witnessing a bond no one has seen in 200 years. Emily looked down at her wrist. The crescent was no longer just a mark. It had formed a delicate pattern of leaves, stars, and a small wolf shape resting beneath a full moon. Beautiful. Impossible. Hers. "I do not understand," she said. "I am not Lycan." "No," Alexander said. "You are something the old stories warned us not to forget." He stepped toward the sacred pool and touched 2 fingers to the surface. The water rose in a ribbon of silver and reflected an image above it, a woman in a plain dress carrying a white wolf cub through a storm, while warriors bowed behind her. The vision lasted only a second, but the sanctuary seemed to breathe when it vanished. Alexander turned back to Emily. The guardian of the moonline was never chosen by rank. Not by blood. Not by strength. She was chosen by the sacred young when the kingdom forgot mercy. Emily stared at him, the words moving through her slowly. Guardian. Moonline. Chosen. None of them sounded like a life that belonged to a girl who slept above an apothecary and counted every dollar before buying groceries. The pup nudged her chin, warm now, alive now, trusting without hesitation. Alexander's expression softened at the edges, though his voice remained steady. "The pup has named you her protector. By our oldest law, no one may remove her from your care unless she chooses to go." A stunned silence followed. Then the sanctuary doors opened wider on their own, revealing the first pale hint of morning beyond the trees. Emily looked toward that light, and for one fragile moment, she imagined walking back to her small room, returning to the clinic, pretending none of this had happened. But the mark on her wrist pulsed, and Alexander inhaled sharply, as if that pulse had reached something inside him too. His silver eyes met hers. The pup settled between them with a contented sigh. And Emily understood, with a fear deeper than danger, that the sanctuary had not finished choosing. Morning entered the sanctuary slowly, first as a pale line beyond the trees, then as a soft gold wash over the silver leaves, the sacred pool, and the faces of every Lycan who had knelt before a human girl they had been taught to overlook. Emily Carter stood in the center of it all with Alexander Blackwood's coat around her shoulders, the sacred pup resting peacefully against her chest, and a moonlit mark glowing on her wrist like a promise she had never asked for but somehow could not refuse. The world outside the archway was waking. Somewhere beyond the forest, the border clinic still smelled of antiseptic and boiled herbs. Noah Bell still needed moonroot for his fever. The old bridge was still flooded. Her rented room above the apothecary still waited with its crooked window and thin blanket and the chipped blue mug she used every morning. That life had been small, but it had been understandable. This one had kings, holy water, living moonlight, and a pup whose trust had turned ancient law inside out. Emily looked at Alexander. "I need to go back." Several guards lifted their heads in surprise. Alexander did not. "To the clinic," he said. Emily nodded. "There is a child waiting for medicine. I came into the woods for him before I found her." The pup opened one eye, as if listening, then tucked her nose back into Emily's sleeve. Something unreadable crossed Alexander's face. Respect, maybe. Or the realization that even after being accused, surrounded, and marked by forces older than the crown, Emily's first thought was still a sick child in a small house by the south fence. "Then we go to the clinic," he said. A shocked murmur moved through the kneeling guards. One older warrior looked up. "Your Majesty, the council will demand answers before the human leaves sacred ground." Alexander turned, and the murmur died. "The council will receive answers when I have them. Until then, this sanctuary has made its judgment." His gaze moved over every bowed head. Emily Carter entered forbidden ground because our own failed to protect what was sacred. She did not steal the pup. She saved the future of this kingdom. The word struck Emily more gently than praise, but deeper. Saved. Not trespassed. Not contaminated. Saved. Her eyes burned, and she looked down quickly because she did not want a courtyard full of Lycans to see how much it meant to be named correctly for once. Alexander stepped beside her, not in front of her, not behind her, but beside her, as if the position itself mattered. "No one will touch her," he said. "No one will question her without me present. No one will separate the pup from her arms unless the pup chooses it." Then, after a pause that made the sanctuary hold its breath again, he added, "And no one will call her merely human in my hearing." Emily looked up. His silver eyes met hers, steady and impossible to read, yet something in them had changed since the moment he had first appeared beneath the arch. The cold distance of a king was still there, but beneath it lived a question neither of them was ready to name. The mark on Emily's wrist warmed. At the same instant, a faint silver line appeared across Alexander's palm, matching the curve of hers. The guards saw it. Emily saw it. Alexander slowly looked down, and for the first time since entering the sanctuary, the Lycan King seemed truly shaken. The sacred pup lifted her head and gave a soft, contented sound, as if the answer had been obvious all along. Emily whispered, "What does that mean?" Alexander closed his hand, but the glow slipped between his fingers. Outside, the morning bells of Blackwood began to ring across the valley, announcing a dawn that would not belong to the old laws anymore. He looked at Emily, at the pup between them, at the sanctuary shining behind her like it had finally remembered its own heart. "It means," he said quietly, "the moon did not only choose you to guard my kingdom. It may have chosen you to change my life."